Okay, in this video we're going to talk about classifying triangles. Classifying is another way of saying naming triangles because of certain properties that they have. There are two ways to name triangles, or at least triangles have two different ways to classify them or to name them, kind of like us with a first name and a last name. We can be called by both, right? So triangles can be called by two different names. One is based on their angles, the angles they have inside them. And two is based on the length of their sides, whether they have the same length as another side or if they have all different side lengths, something like that. So first, let's take a look at angles. Before we look at triangles, let's have a quick review about the different types of angles. If you remember from fourth grade, this is a 90-degree angle, and you usually show it with a little square in the corner to show that it's 90 degrees. A 90-degree angle is called a right angle. Right? And then the other angles are, the other two angles, the main ones, are based off that. So if it's less than 90 degrees, so say it's like that, so 90 degrees would be up here, right? So it's less than 90 degrees. This is called an acute angle. On the other hand, if you have one that is more than 90 degrees, right, here's 90 degrees and it's more than that, this one is called an obtuse angle. Something that has 180 degrees, that's called a straight angle, and something that has more than 180 degrees, that one is called a reflex angle. We don't normally deal with those in elementary school. So let's take a look at triangles. So with triangles, every triangle that you have has three angles inside because of its three sides, right? Two of those angles are always going to be acute. So I'll pick two of these here. In this case, there are three acute angles, right? But here we've got one acute, two acute there, and this one has one acute, two acute. So every single triangle has two acute angles. It's the third angle that defines it. So in this case, the third angle is an acute angle. So this is called an acute triangle. In this case, the third angle is obtuse. So this is called an obtuse triangle. And in this case, because there's a square here, this third angle is a right angle. So this is called a right triangle. So not too difficult. You've got three angles, two are always acute, and the third one is either acute, obtuse, or right, and that defines the name of that triangle. So that's one name, that's one way you can classify triangles. The other way you can classify triangles is based on the length of the sides. So in some triangles, like this one, all the sides have the same length. I draw a little line through them, just a little, like a little 1 if you like, Roman numeral 1. To show that each of those are the same. So they're equal. So it's an I, not an A in this, equilateral is what we call that particular triangle, equilateral, because it has three sides that are equal, three sides that are the same. It's an equilateral triangle. It's also, if you notice, an acute. So this one is an equilateral and an acute. So those are its two names, right? So we looked at those, remember, just a second ago. But we're going to name them by side length. So any ones that have the same three sides, same three side lengths, is called an equilateral triangle. You can have triangles then that have two side lengths the same. So this one here, those two are the same, and this one is different, right? Looks like a little triangle guy standing up there. Anyway, so this one is called, it's an odd name, but it's called an isosceles triangle. Isosceles because it has two of the same length sides and one different. It's not the only way an isosceles can be drawn. I could have this side length the same as this side length, right? And then when I join them here, that's a longer one This is called the hypotenuse, it's the longer one. So those are both the same, and this one's different. So that's also an isosceles. This one happens to be an isosceles with acute angles, so it's an acute isosceles. This one is a right isosceles, but they're both isosceles because they have two sides the same length. Interestingly enough, an equilateral could also be called an isosceles because it also has two side lengths the same. It just happens to have a third that's the same. So the definition for isosceles is two sides the same. This has two sides the same as well, so an equilateral is also an isosceles. But this isosceles is not an equilateral. So don't want to confuse you there, but the main thing is if it has three side lengths the same, it's equilateral. If it has two the same, it's isosceles. And then you have ones that have three different side lengths. All of those are three different side lengths. And this one is called a scalene. Scalene, just meaning it has three different side lengths. Now this scalene happens to be an obtuse. This is an obtuse angle here. It almost looks like a 90-degree angle. But if it was a 90-degree angle, I'd put that little square in the corner. So maybe it's 91 degrees, which means it's obtuse. And of course it has two acute. So this is a scalene obtuse, right? So again, triangles have two different names. One based on the type of angles that they have, and two based on the side lengths that they have. And when you classify triangles, you should name both of them. I just noticed that I spelled isosceles wrong. It's an odd one to spell. There's actually another S in there. If I just kind of move that over a bit, you can pop the S in there. Easy one to misspell. I also sometimes misspell equilateral. I put an extra L in there for some reason, but there's only one L in equilateral.